This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service. Manx Radio! You're going to hear it described as a daily miracle. And indeed, Christian television in an Arab world would seem to be absolutely impossible. Yet it's been happening successfully for the past 30 years. And we're going to hear its remarkable story this morning. But first, some music, inspired by the fact that today is the Christian feast of Pentecost, so named because it's 50 days after Easter and commemorates the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the close friends, the disciples of Jesus, filling them with the courage to go out into a divided and unsettled world to continue the work of Jesus, healing, teaching, caring, establishing the Christian message that still, over 2,000 years later, stretches around the world. Here's the London Fox Singers and O Breath of Life Come Sweeping Through Us. Revive thy church with life and power.
O breath of life come sweeping through us. Revive thy church with life and power. O breath of life, come cleanse, renew us, and fit thy church to meet this hour. O wind of God, come bend us, break us, till humbly we confess our need. Then in thy tenderness remake us, revive, restore, for this we plead. O breath of love, come breathe within us, renewing thought and will and heart. Come, love of Christ, afresh to win us. Revive thy church in every part.
O Breath of Life Come Sweeping Through Us, the voices of the London Fox Singers. Now it's time to find out more about that daily miracle that is the work of the Christian charity SAT7. And we're going to hear the story told by the founder of SAT7, Dr. Terry Ascott, and the UK Executive Director, Rachel Fadipe. SAT7 could be described in a simple sentence as Christians from East and West working with one purpose. And that purpose is to see a growing church in the Middle East and North Africa confident in Christian faith and witness, serving the community and contributing to the good of society and culture. So how is that purpose worked out? Well, SAT7 UK is a charity based in Wiltshire with a small staff team supported by a larger team of volunteers, who in turn are part of a worldwide family of organisations, and their collective mission is to give the churches and Christians of the Middle East and North Africa an opportunity to deepen their personal faith through inspirational, informative and educational television services. The founder of SAT7 International is Dr. Terry Ascott. He was brought up in a non-Christian household, introduced to Jesus Christ through a boys' club summer camp, studied engineering, and then offered his services to the international charity Operation Mobilization that spreads the Christian message alongside humanitarian and relief work in some of the world's most deprived areas. Let's join Terry now as he takes up the story.
I got involved with Operation Mobilization and was committed to spending a year with OM. I thought I would be in Eastern Europe, but after a few months there, my visas were getting difficult to obtain going into Eastern Europe, and I was asked to go to Beirut, Lebanon. Well, I didn't know where Beirut, Lebanon was. I had to look it up on a map. I got there, spent 6 months really, and then I felt God wanted me to spend another year there. And that was 50 years ago, and I've been in the Middle East ever since.
What have you been doing during that 50 years?
First few years in Lebanon, we were publishing books for distribution through secular bookshops with Christian content and making pamphlets and other things for OM teams to distribute in the Arab world. But we did some research that showed that the average Arab spent 2 seconds a year reading a book, which is very discouraging for a book publisher. So what were they reading? Well, newspapers and magazines. So we set about designing a newsstand magazine that could carry Christian truth, that could actually be sold on the newsstands in Arab countries. But the civil war came and things got worse and worse, so we evacuated and went to Egypt to explore new talent there. We thought we would just be gone for a few months until the war finished, and didn't even take our summer clothes with us. So 1 week after the birth of our first son, Jackie and I and about a dozen others left and went to Egypt, where we started, with God's help, a newsstand magazine called Huwa Wahia, or Magala as it's known in the West. The newsstands in 14 different Arab countries carried the magazine. The only country we really had problems with was Saudi Arabia, who used to actually tear certain pages they didn't like out of the magazine and then send us an invoice for their labor costs in tearing the pages out. We actually ended up printing over 20 million copies of the magazine over time and had the largest circulation of any non-Egyptian magazine or imported magazine in Egypt at one point. But one night when I was walking home from our publishing office in Cairo, I came across this family living at the side of the road. They were actually right next to where I live, and they were the guards for the sand, steel and cement for a new construction. But tonight, they were all huddled around a little black and white TV set, literally at the side of the road. And I thought, well, what? Where did they get this from? And I looked, and there was this electric cord going across the building site to a neighbour's power socket. And I just stood there watching it in disbelief, and it sort of struck me, yes, we've got a great readership for this magazine, we're still distributing books, but what about the millions of people that cannot read or live in countries where they can't access uncensored Christian content? So I sort of put it out of my mind because I was not a great fan of television, and certainly not of Christian television with all its on-air appeals for money and its dependency on sponsored programs from America and so on. But I couldn't escape the fact that it really was the only way that literally half of the Arab world who were not functionally literate would ever hear the gospel. And eventually we got together a group of Christians and discussed the possibility of starting Christian television production for the region. But it wasn't until the late 80s when we saw the beginning of direct-to-home satellite television services that bypassed national censorship that the idea really, really became important to me. As we were seeing what could we do in this area to take advantage of this future opportunity, I was actually arrested and deported from Egypt over human rights issues, actually. I've been channeling information about Christians in prison in Egypt, but we had a delegation from Amnesty that was a little bit too high profile, and the government realized that I was a source of information, and they said goodbye to me. So I moved to Cyprus, but actually that was God's way of kind of clearing my desk, if you like, and giving me the time to focus on the idea of developing the satellite television ministry. But it was really tough. Church leaders that I spoke to, somewhat condescending, they said, oh, it's a wonderful idea, but they really didn't believe it could happen. They thought, where would you get the money? They were afraid of American money coming in and making Christianity look like a foreign import into the Middle East, forgetting the fact that Christians have always lived in the Middle East, and in fact it was birthed in the Middle East. Anyway, we struggle with other issues. Television makes the implicit explicit. The Bible doesn't tell us what Jesus looks like, but we're going to show you tonight. Or you have to have a face to go in front of a television camera, at least if you don't want to scare the audience away. And you have to have an ego and self-confidence. Now, all of these things are not morally neutral. They are actually things that you have to mitigate for if you're going to have a Christian television service. So we spent 3 years actually talking with church leaders, having consultations about programming policies. We really did put together an ownership structure that guaranteed that decisions about programming and other things were taken by Middle East Christians currently living in the Middle East. This would make us less culturally and politically and religiously clumsy as we proceeded. So we got together a coalition of churches and foreign agencies working in the Middle East and formed a partnership in 1995, November. Really exciting. But it took us another 6 months to get our first programs on the air, and it was just 2 hours a week. We just didn't have ready-made programming. We didn't have people who really knew what they were doing. And actually, people didn't believe that we were going to do it. But when the first program went on air in May 1996, suddenly everybody wanted to be involved. And it was great. They all came forward. 5 years later, we were a daily service with a lot of repeating. We grew. We added in Persian programming to the Arabic. Because we managed to find some people in Iran who wanted to collaborate. And later we added Turkish. Now all these channels and the programming and the staff grew with God's help. And today we've got 4 channels. We've got an Arabic channel. We've got a separate 24-hour a day children's channel in Arabic. Why? Because we cover 6 time zones, and it was impossible to schedule children's programming on another Arabic channel. Just the kids in Morocco were still in school when the kids in Bahrain had gone to bed. It was just impossible. But that children's channel has won the hearts and trust of people from all different faith backgrounds. As a taxi driver once told our audience relations director when they started chatting in Alexandria, "Oh, so that's 7 kids. Oh, that's the only channel I can trust my children with." And he was a Muslim. So it's been really exciting to see how many millions of children have been exposed to the gospel through that children's channel, which has animation, Bible stories, all kinds of drama and songs and music, and it's so attractive. It's really exciting. I wish we had something like it in this country. And then one channel 24 hours a day in Turkish, programs made in Turkey by the small Christian minority there. And then 24 hours a day into Iran and Afghanistan in Dari or Farsi. That's also been amazing. The responses from Iran are so exciting. It's actually the fastest growing convert church in the world today in Iran, despite all the bad news you hear from Iran.
What we see in the media would lead us to believe that you couldn't possibly do what you're doing.
When we first started, we were making programs in Iran. We were dubbing programs, but gradually the government did clamp down and we lost equipment, we lost pre-recorded material. And so today we're only able to make programming from our studios in different countries in Europe and in Cyprus and in the US. We have an Afghan team putting together programs, including a live broadcast into Afghanistan every week. So, yeah, it has become much more difficult since 2011 for believers. They stopped believers who spoke Farsi, or they were converts basically, from worshipping. There's a lot of freedom for Armenian Orthodox traditional Christians to meet, as long as they don't allow non-Armenian Christians into their meetings and so on. But a recent survey that was done by a Dutch research company, a secular company, showed there's over 1.3 million Christians in Iran today, and we know the number of people born Christian is far less than 200,000. So that means there's over 1 million people ready to admit in a survey with a complete stranger that, yes, I became a Christian. So we know the number's not exaggerated, but at least 1 million converts in the country. That's really, really exciting.
It is, but it's also very brave, isn't it?
It is, and there's a price to pay. People have been disappeared. Certainly there are many in prison today. I think there's a tolerance for people becoming a Christian if they keep their mouth shut, but as soon as they start sharing their faith, the authorities get involved and they face all kinds of challenges. But, we forget this is the history of the church, centuries of persecution. In fact, the Pew Foundation recently published a study that showed the persecution of Christians worldwide in the last 20 years has really gone to an all-time high. The normal experience for Christians throughout history has been one of persecution.
Tell me about the presenters and what kind of people do you look for?
Well, we look for people who know how to share their faith, to be politically and religiously sensitive. We never attack another religion. We certainly don't get into political statements, but we need to present the gospel clearly. In fact, the vision and mission includes two big things for us. One, to make the gospel available to everyone in the Middle East and North Africa so that they can make an informed decision about Christ. And I believe it's a human right that everyone should have the opportunity to hear the gospel at least once in their life. And the second goal is to support, empower and encourage the church in its life, work and witness for Christ, because it's a wonderful church, but in places it does need the encouragement. Programs made by Christians in freer countries of the Middle East, for example, or just a regular teaching program that will help them grow. They're in isolated situations where they don't have proper church they can go to with a trained pastor and so on.
How about finance? How do you keep solvent?
Yes, in fact, when we first started, several organisations said, we're not going to fund you because we don't see this as sustainable. You don't want to raise money on air and you don't want to sell your airtime to Western televangelists. So how are you going to pay for this? Essentially, all our funding comes from donations. And we've had some rather worrying times, where we couldn't pay our airtime costs or we couldn't pay salaries until the very last minute. But God has always provided. It's amazing. There was one August, we really couldn't pay our satellite time. And we had salaries we had to pay too. And we really didn't see how we were going to get through August of that year. And then a supporter, a businessman in the UK, suddenly sold one of his companies and he sent us over £260,000 just in time to pay all these bills. And we've seen so many miracles like that, thanks to God touching hearts. God has always provided.
A few moments ago, we heard from founder of SAT7, Dr. Terry Ascott. Rachel Fadipe is the executive director in the UK, and she is absolutely sure what SAT7 is.
Well, SAT7 is a daily miracle.
How did you get involved, Rachel?
Now, I've actually been with SAT7 for 20 years. And roughly 20 years ago, I had my second child. And I had the opportunity, the firm I was with gave you full pay maternity leave for 12 months. So my husband and I thought this is a great opportunity for us to explore our calling and our mission. And so we put out some feelers about whether there was anybody that would be interested in, because I was a project manager at Ford, and my husband was in the city working in IT. And SAT7 responded and had a project for us to work on. So we took my very small children out to Cyprus, and we did 1 year, turned into 2.5. We were there 2.5 years, and then my husband had felt called into pastoral ministry. So he's now an FIEC minister in Wiltshire. And so we came back, and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But then the opportunity came up to stay with SAT7, and I now run SAT7 UK, our operations here in the UK, where we seek to tell people about SAT7 and really get as much prayer support as we possibly can. And I say it's a daily miracle because God just provides for this ministry and brings viewers to us. We're always getting messages of somebody who says, I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt convicted to turn on the television and your channel was playing. Now I'm calling you because I'm amazed by what I've heard. We've even had somebody who sat down with some pills to take their own life and felt compelled to turn the television on. God worked through the television programs to save that person. Even today, you could be in a country where it's not legal to be a Christian, and you're able to watch Christian television programs without fear of anybody knowing you're watching, of any consequences in watching. So it's still today, even with this great rise of social media, the best platform to reach into people's homes with the gospel.
The privacy of television is its great gift. But there could still be a lot of opposition and barriers to this developing.
And one of the reasons why they do let us on, of course, is we don't speak against any other faiths. We don't speak against anybody. So people who don't agree with our programming can still watch it and they're not offended and they learn. They often viewed it almost as an educational channel because it's presenting the Christian faith in many different ways. Some of our programs are a bit values-based. We have a whole Arabic channel for children. 5 time zones across the Middle East, so you can make a great channel just for children. We have programs for women in the afternoon who are often at home, sort of the chat show style of programs, people on the sofa. So we have a massive range of programs for the whole family, as well as the sort of maybe more traditional Bible teaching and church services. So it's that appeal, something for everyone in all walks of life. I said at the beginning, it's this daily miracle, and that needs prayer every day. So we're really looking for people in this country willing to pray with us. So we try to resource them. And those resources are trying to help and equip us here as Christians in the UK, learn about the Middle East, and just have our own lives enriched while also helping our brothers and sisters in Christ in the Middle East. We don't ask our viewers to pay, so everything is free to air. So the people receiving the programmes just do that freely. First thing that struck me is I can't talk about Sat7 until people understand the challenges of the Middle East. So a lot of what we do here is to really help explain the context that Sat7's broadcasted into, because you have got historic churches in the Middle East, particularly in the Arabic world, and so that's a very different type of context to then the newer churches and the persecuted church and the situation in places like Iran and Afghanistan. That's actually quite a different context to say in Egypt. And then you've got people in urban areas and people in rural areas whose, again, experience and opportunities are very different. Many people in the Middle East will never meet a Christian in their lives. So how do you reach that person versus somebody in a big city where there perhaps are churches and there are other opportunities? It's a complex region. We couldn't summarise the UK in one sentence, could we? You certainly can't summarise the Middle East up in some simple little ball.
I think the bottom line is for us to value the fact that we can go to any church that we choose, we can talk about our faith openly, and that is not the case for many Christians, is it?
No, not the case. And I think many of us during the COVID pandemic got a little glimpse of what it is like every day for many people in the Middle East, where we couldn't go to a church. In Algeria, for instance, a few years ago we were recording church services there, and now all those Protestant churches, bar one, have been closed. They've closed 47 Protestant churches in Algeria. So those people were, a few years ago, going to church just like we were, and suddenly they can't go, and that's a shock. And at least during COVID, we could still meet, we could have our Zoom meetings, we could still feel connected. Well, there are many instances they can't even meet together. So to not have that at all, then what they can turn on the television is so important. In some areas where you've got a new Christian, they don't really know what even church is in terms of what do you do. So when we are broadcasting the service, that could be the first time they've seen inside a church building, and they're a Christian. So this is why it's a complex region, and every person is an individual. And what I should just add is one of the other aspects to Sat7 is we don't just broadcast. We have this amazing viewer support team who, when someone's watched a programme and they've been convicted, they can speak to a person, because that is key. You know, we can do so much with the television, but you need to have conversations, you need to walk with people like we do in our churches in the UK. And that side of Sat7 is often not part of the unsung hero in a sense, because we can put people in touch with local churches and underground church movements, whatever is appropriate for where they are. And that's where the real spiritual growth then happens. So it's amazing. And we do not seek to replace the local church. We are there to equip the local church. And so that's very important to us.
Thank you to founder of SAT7, Dr. Terry Ascott, and UK Executive Director Rachel Fadipe. And if you'd like to know more about their work, take a look at their website, sat7uk.org. That's SAT and the number 7, sat7uk.org. And we finish off with our usual look at the notice board. And with TT practices starting on Monday, our news today is mostly about the places where refreshments are being served by churches on and off the TT course. St Ninian's Church at the traffic lights on Glencrutchery Road here in Douglas starts serving refreshments on Monday the 25th, and they'll be open between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. up to and including Saturday, June the 6th, except Tuesday the 26th, when they'll be open in the evening from 5:30 to 8:30. Then they'll be closed all day on Wednesday the 27th. Union Mills Chapel will be open for TT food and hospitality from the 27th onwards. They say, if the roads are closed, we're open. Nothing to do with the TT, but there will be the usual tea at 3 this Thursday, the 28th, in Ballagary Chapel in St Mark's. A sumptuous afternoon tea served at 3 p.m, with a warm welcome for all. Also this Thursday, the 28th, you're invited to lunch and skeet at Ballakilferrick Chapel from 11:30 to 1 p.m. Come along for good food and friendly company. Soup with a roll and butter, tea or coffee and biscuits to follow for just £5. In Bride Church Hall, the famous TTTs will be available for 4 days, Friday the 29th of May to Monday the 4th of June, opening each day from 11:30 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. Marown Parish Church, right on the TT course, will be serving food and drinks during all practices and races. There'll be parking for bikes only around the church itself, no cars or vans. Even though Marown Church is right on the course, it can be reached by foot or bicycle via the old Peel to Douglas railway line. Just down the road from Ballaugh Bridge, the TT Cafe in the Ballaugh Parish Hall will be open from 9 a.m. on Saturday, May the 30th, and then it'll be open every day from 9 a.m. up to and including Friday, June the 5th, for all-day breakfasts, homemade cakes, soups, hot drinks and much more. Christchurch in Laxey have decided to rerun their very popular Paper Flower Festival during TT Week, incorporating some new displays specially for the bikers. The Paper Flower Festival will run from Saturday, May the 30th to Saturday, June the 6th, with Christchurch Laxey open daily from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m, except Sunday, May the 31st, when it'll open at noon after their morning service, with refreshments available every day. The Abbey Church Hall in Ballasalla will be serving hot and cold food and drinks between 9 a.m. and 2:30 on Saturday the 30th, and then again on the 1st, the 3rd and the 6th of June. And finally, Sulby Methodist Church at the Crossroads in Sulby Village will have their usual Mad Sunday barbecue at 12 noon next Sunday the 31st, following their church service at 10:30. They'll also be serving food and drinks during race week. Every time the roads are closed for racing, Sulby Methodist Church will be open, serving hot meals, daily specials, sandwiches, cakes and drinks. And that's all that we've time for now, but I'll be back tonight at 9 o'clock with Sundown, and I'd love you to come and join me in our virtual lounge for our usual mix of your requests and dedications and the very best easy listening music. But for now, this is Judith saying thank you for listening and wishing you and those you love a blessed and safe week and a very good morning.